Hi, I'm making a series of videos about revolutions. Why? Because we talk about revolutions all the time. In American politics, all we talk about is either the American Revolution, a noble uprising against a tax-hungry tyrant, or the godless, commie Marxist revolution, when they took away everyone's stuff. That's it. And that's why I'd like to talk about some revolutions from the rest of history before either of these two events, so we can understand revolutions in a better context. Just to note, the moments we are covering are simply snapshots of particular times in history. The year, 1170 BCE. The location, ancient Egypt. More specifically, the town of Set Mayat, which translates to the place of truth. This is a small village of workmen who are busy constructing nearby tombs at the Valley of Kings. These were not slaves, but rather highly paid craftsmen who made 3 times as much as a field hand. When they went to the tombs to begin their labor, rations and water and their payments in grain were brought out to them from the village. The process of paying salaries was a highly religious rite, meant to solidify Mayat, the name for what the ancient Egyptians considered the natural order of all things. This year, the rations did not show up at their regular time. A week went by, and then 2. Eventually, the workers were so hungry, they decided enough was enough, and they put down their tools and refused to work any further. This is the first organized strike in recorded history. Considering the greater context, this strike does not come out of nowhere. It's the middle of the Bronze Age collapse. Invading sea people have stormed the Mediterranean, invading and collapsing nearby civilizations, from the Greeks to the Hittites. The longest discovered papyrus, the Great Harris Papyrus, records, the foreign countries plotted on their islands, and the people were scattered by battle, all at one time, and no land could stand before their arms. A large fleet was on the move towards Egypt. The current pharaoh, Ramses III, had a strategy to counteract their overwhelming numbers. He had fortifications built in southern Palestine and assembled a large navy at the mouth of the Nile. By preventing them from making a landing at the Nile, Ramses III secured a decisive victory, but at the cost of heavy casualties. The drop in population meant fewer workers to harvest, and along with bad environmental conditions, led to a shortage of grain. In order to replenish the treasury, Ramses III organized a campaign against the nearby land of Punt, which can be remembered with this helpful limerick. Ramses went down to Punt and acted like a total country-invading imperialist. Despite this, the coffers remained empty, likely due to corruption and lack of trade. The high priest of Ammon controlled the finances of the kingdom, and it was suspected that much of the riches were disappearing into the clutches of the temple. At this time, the pharaoh also had to organize expensive traditions that had to be maintained after a great victory in order to solidify Mayat. On top of this, a grand jubilee for the pharaoh's 30th year was being planned. Ironically, the shortage of rations and the delays in payments to the workers were seen as a serious violation of Mayat. After 18 days of delays, the workers organized a sit-in at the nearby temple of Thutmose III and marched into town with protests, crying of great oaths and "We are hungry." The authorities were at a complete loss of what to do. Workers going against the holy principle of Mayat was completely unprecedented. They first tried to placate them with pastries, but these failed to satisfy them, and the workers organized to occupy the main storehouse of grain in Thebes. The local chief of police arrived and attempted to negotiate with them. The men called for a letter to be written, saying, "The prospect of hunger and thirst has driven us to this. There is no clothing, there is no ointment, there is no fish, there are no vegetables. Send to Pharaoh, our good lord, about it, and send to the vizier, our superior, that we may be supplied with provisions." Eventually, payments in barley and beer were delivered and negotiations were made for back pay. But when the workers returned to their labor, they found that their next payment would also be delayed, likely because all the local officials were busy preparing for the Jubilee, thus leading to another strike. This went on for 3 years. until it culminated in a standoff at the entrance of the Valley of Kings. The workers were preventing any sacrifices from entering to give food and drink offerings to those in the afterlife, which was a serious breach in protocol. The Fuzz was sent in to crack down, and when they arrived with armed forces, the workers threatened to damage the tombs in retaliation. Eventually, the authorities stepped down. Evidence implied that the two parties came to a resolution, increasing the pay of the workers. But the principle of Mayat had been severely called into question, with ramifications continuing on through the rest of the pharaoh's rule, as strikes continued on into new eras. Okay, so that's it for this video. I have more videos planned throughout history and at different places around the globe. If there's anything that you'd like to hear about in particular, just let me know, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.